Thank you. Hey, everybody. I'm Jack. I'm President Kennedy's grandson. First things first, it's an honor to welcome the Taoiseach here today. We're so happy to welcome him to the library. I also have to thank everyone who works at the library who does such a great job for this institution, especially Rachel Floor. She is incredible. She's done so much to make the library modern and relevant, to keep President Kennedy's memory alive, and my family really appreciates all of her help. I also want to thank Ambassador Bern Nason. Thank you so much for being here, as well as my cousin Joe Kennedy, who is doing such a great job as Special Envoy to Northern Ireland. And to Sheila Fitzgerald, the Special Consulate in Boston. And yes, I did ask how to pronounce your first name. I have serious Irish pride, and it's all because of one person, my mom. Every St. Patrick's Day, I would wake up, and there would be a green string tied from my doorknob to my bed, back to my desk, all around my room, and it looked like the world's most sophisticated laser system you've ever seen. And she told me that it was because a leprechaun named Shawnee had tied up everything so I couldn't get out of bed. And all the milk would be dyed green, and she absolutely loved it. But I understand what Irish history is about, and I can't quote you Yeats because I've never read Yeats, and I can't sing you an Irish ballad because the Prime Minister is here, but I can tell you a story about my mom and the maddest that I've ever seen Ambassador Caroline Kennedy. I was in 9th grade, and I came home from school, and the teacher sent an email to all the parents, and they said that they wouldn't, St. Patrick's Day was the next day, and they said, we won't be celebrating St. Patrick's Day because we don't want to encourage drinking. And my mom lost it. She said, being Irish is about a lot more than wearing green and drinking Guinness. It's about the fight against oppression, for independence, for self-sovereignty, and the right to vote. And you can be sure that James Joyce was added to the freshman class reading list the next year. My grandfather, President Kennedy, called Ireland the land for which he had the most affection. He was the first sitting president to visit Ireland when he went in 1963. He believed in peace and progress. He believed in science, and he believed that art could change the world, because his Irish heritage formed his worldview, and his Catholic faith guided him throughout his life. He was the youngest president ever elected, and the first Catholic ever elected president at a time when nobody thought that was possible. He would be so proud to welcome to his library Ireland's youngest ever elected Taoiseach, a man whose tenure in office has brought Ireland more first than even President Kennedy could, a historic leader, one who believes in peace, progress, art, and science, just as President Kennedy did. So it's my honor to welcome him to the stage and to have him at my grandfather's library. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack, for the very kind introduction. A story is told of a powerful Irish king in the days before St. Patrick. He found out that he was dying, and he issued a proclamation saying that he would give a field full of gold to his truest friend, and he gathered his closest friends, family, and advisors to his bedside. However, when the king revealed that he was going to give his gift of gold to the Shanachie, the storyteller, there were howls of indignation and lots of complaints. His friends were furious, reminding the king that the Shanachie had caused him nothing but trouble during his reign, challenging his decisions and sometimes even daring to oppose his actions. The king explained to his friends that while he valued their loyalty, they'd always told him what he wanted to hear, whereas the Shanachie, the storyteller, told him what he needed to hear. And now, on his deathbed, with the wisdom of age, he realized what true friendship really was. President John F. Kennedy was a true friend of Ireland. When he became the first sitting president to visit Ireland back in 1963, he spoke before the very first ever joint sitting of our Oireachtas, our House of Representatives and our Senate meeting together. The speech is rightly celebrated for its eloquent tribute to Ireland, past, present and future. But I also think it went far beyond an exercise in nostalgia. President Kennedy set out the mission of our foreign policy and laid down a challenge to the country of his forebears. His stirring words suggested that Ireland's destiny was to play a part in world affairs, to be, in his words, the protector of the weak and the voice of the small. Today, in the 21st century, in face of some of our greatest crises, we're mindful of the challenge he set for us. We're determined to embrace our destiny and to speak out against injustice without fear or favour. As part of the community of Europe, as a member of the United Nations, as a country with our own history of being invaded, we stand publicly and openly against Russia's unprovoked and imperialist invasion of Ukraine. We recognise the fighting there as a battle between freedom and tyranny, between the rule of international law and war crime, between hope and despair. So, as part of the European Union, we've agreed a package of $50 billion of assistance to Ukraine in recent months. And we've also agreed to open negotiations to have Ukraine join our European Union to provide a long-term guarantee of security to its people, its economy, and above all, its freedom. So when I meet President Biden later this week, I'm going to thank him on behalf of Ireland and Europe for the strong and steadfast stand that the US has taken in opposing Putin's war of aggression in Ukraine. I cannot overstate the appreciation of the European Union for American leadership at this time of great crisis on our continent, the first full-scale land war since the Second World War. Some would like to ignore the conflict, but fail to realize that this conflict will ignore them. Ukraine is facing an adversary that will not stop there. As an international community, we must speak out and we must act, because if Ukraine falls, so too will a shadow fall across Europe. We must not forget the lessons of the 1930s in Europe. You cannot appease a dictator. And I think, once again, Why England Slept must be essential reading. In his inauguration speech, President Kennedy famously said, "We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and success of liberty." I believe these are apt words to recall in his library today, when freedom and democracy is once again under grave threat in our world. When I hear people in America and in Europe talk about Ukraine fatigue, I think of the Ukrainian men and women who are making incredible sacrifices to defend not only their sovereignty and territorial integrity, but also to defend European security and freedom, to defend the values and existential interests that our transatlantic alliance is built on. We cannot say to them that we're fatigued in the face of their enormous sacrifice and their incredible bravery. Our transatlantic commitment to Ukraine must and will remain steadfast and assured, including the provision of political, humanitarian, military, financial, and other help to ensure that Ukraine prevails. Ireland has always been a true friend to the US. Throughout our shared history, we've celebrated your greatest triumphs, and we've shed tears when you've had to endure your darkest tragedies, particularly on 9/11. We mourned as a nation when President Kennedy was killed only a few months after his visit to Ireland, and we mourned again 5 years later when his beloved brother was murdered by an extremist, someone blinded by hate and the irrational idea that an assassination could help his political cause. Sadly, in the years since then, the cycle of violence in the Middle East has claimed many more victims, both there and around the world. What happened on the 7th of October was an act of pure evil, and hatred can never be forgotten, contextualized, or excused. But colleagues, when thousands of children are killed in response, no one can just avert their eyes. Surely the life of a child is the greatest gift of all, and childhood should be a blessing. Today in Gaza, for so many children, it's a death sentence and a curse. We all know that there are guilty people who perpetrated unspeakable acts of terrorism, but there are innocent men, women, and children who are suffering for those sins, and they should not be subject to collective punishment. The cries of the innocent will haunt us forever if we stay silent, and their cries will engender radicalism and beget more violence and more vengeance. No child ever gave their consent for acts of terrorism in Ireland or Israel or anywhere else, and no child should ever be punished for them. It is unconscionable that they are dying not just as a result of relentless bombing and destruction, but also because of hunger and thirst and the absence of basic medical care. If we're not consistent, if we do not see and respect the equal value of a child of Israel and a child of Palestine, then the rest of the world, particularly the global south, which after all is most of the world, will not listen to us when we call on them to stand by the rules and institutions that are the bedrock of the civilized world. In this scenario, we will all be losers and will all be infinitely less secure. Consistent application of international law and international humanitarian law to states and non-state actors alike has to be the basis on which the international community engages with one another. So in Ireland, we will continue to call for an immediate ceasefire, the unconditional release of all of the hostages, and a massive and sustained increase in humanitarian aid, food and medicine for the people of Gaza. We'll also continue to call for a meaningful political pathway leading to self-determination for the Palestinian people, a fully fledged nation-state of their own, a homeland in the land of their forefathers. From our own painful history in Ireland, we know that ceasefire does not mean surrender, nor does it necessarily mean peace, and it certainly doesn't mean weakness. A ceasefire doesn't mean forgiveness either, but it does present a glimmer of hope. It means breaking a cycle of violence, recrimination, and retaliation, and it means believing in our shared humanity instead of a need for vengeance. And tonight I'm thinking particularly of the words of Bobby Kennedy, who knew so painfully what it was like to lose a loved one to violence. We all have seen the video of how he spoke so eloquently on the night that Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, for his courage and his beliefs. Speaking with unparalleled empathy and eloquence, he prayed for understanding and compassion in place of hatred and revenge. Likewise, President Kennedy did not ask us to distinguish between the weak and oppressed. We have to speak up for them all, and we must dedicate ourselves to freedom and peace in Gaza as well as the rest of the world. Courage in the face of crisis, unshakable optimism in the darkest of times, faith in the future. That is the Kennedy story. In Ireland, we recognise that the cause of peace has benefited so much because of the contributions of the Kennedy family. Ambassador Jean Kennedy Smith played a hugely significant role in laying the foundation for the Good Friday Agreement in the early 1990s. Her brother Ted was a founding member of the Friends of Ireland caucus and is rightly considered an architect of peace in Ireland through his work on Capitol Hill for so many decades. And that story now continues with Joe as President Biden's special economic envoy to Northern Ireland. The United States, more so than any other country, helped to bring about peace and reconciliation in Ireland, and the contribution of the Kennedy family is an enormous part of that story, and one that we in Ireland know well. When President Kennedy visited Galway in 1963, he joked with the locals that if they squinted just hard enough across Galway Bay, and if the conditions were just right, and their sight was good enough, they could just about glimpse Boston. Today, of course, we don't need to strain our sight to see this great city. Indeed, just around the corner from my office, Boston College's beautiful building on St. Stephen's Green welcomes students every month on study programs from abroad. A little further up the road is the American Embassy, where we're fortunate to have a proud Massachusetts native, Claire Cronin, representing the US as ambassador to Ireland. And last summer, Governor Maura Healy led a very large trade delegation to Ireland, and I had the opportunity to greet her at the time. And of course, last year we celebrated the 60th anniversary of that famous visit to Ireland. The anniversary events included a spectacular program organised by Dr. Rachel Floor and her team here at the JFK Library Foundation. And it reminded us of the incredible links between Ireland and the US in general, and Ireland and Massachusetts in particular. As you probably know, 1 in 5 people in Massachusetts claim Irish heritage, including, of course, the governor herself. And our economies are very compatible, with a strong focus on the life sciences, tech, and higher education. And we share your belief in the importance of education and research, and we share your ambition to be a welcoming and inclusive place for talent. A better quality of life that attracts talent and investment, adding value to both our economies and societies. So I'll celebrate these new ties tomorrow when I meet with the Irish community in Boston and with businesses that are creating jobs in Massachusetts and also in Ireland. Colleagues, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. In one of his greatest speeches, President Kennedy presented a strategy for peace, confronting head-on the greatest challenge of the day, the possibility of nuclear war. Today we have to ask ourselves to consider the greatest challenges of our time and what kind of strategy for peace is necessary. We cannot pay tribute to the words unless we also promise to live up to their meaning. Thank you all so much for tonight. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Taoiseach, we are honored by that address. We are honored to have you here, as my cousin Jack welcomed you. I know you experienced the unique American reality of a delayed plane flight. We apologize. But we are thrilled that your first stop in the United States this week, where 100% of the Massachusetts population claims Irishness, that your first stop in the United States is here with us in Boston. And thank you for those remarkable words and the tribute to President Kennedy. Please, once again. Now, everybody, I have this extraordinary opportunity tonight to be the only thing that stands between you and dinner and no speaking program after dinner. So I'm literally what's keeping you in the seats. So because of that, I'm going to cut this speech in half, and we're going to fly right through it. I heard one yay from the front already, so thanks for that vote of confidence. I want to start by recognizing the person that makes all of these things happen on, once again, more notice than my family normally gives her, but Rachel Floor, I don't know, Rachel, where are you? But where you went, thank you. The benefit of having, as many of you know, trying to have to wrangle with my family is anything else seems easy by comparison, including a state visit. So, Rachel, to your team, well done. It's wonderful to see so many friends here this evening as well. Many of you have been stalwart supporters of so many members of our family, and on behalf of all 9,472 of us, we say thank you. Many of you have also met my children, James, 6, and Ellie, who's 8. I depart with them this week as they're on spring break. James said to me, "Daddy, where are you going?" I said, "Well, I have to go to the JFK library tonight to see the Taoiseach." And he said, "A teacup?" I said, "Not quite. The Taoiseach, he's the Prime Minister of Ireland." He said, "What's his name?" And I said, "Leo Varadkar." He said, "Leo the Radical?" Not quite. But it actually made me think for a second, because Taoiseach, in the best sense of the word, it fits. The Taoiseach has, in fact, been an extraordinary force in challenging what it means to be Irish, what it means to offer women a right to choose, what it means to be able to embrace the one you love. The changes ushered in under his watch have transformed Ireland and altered it in the perception of the world. Ireland was, in fact, long known for its wild geese, those who fled during centuries of rebellion to find shelter on other shores, not as conquerors or nomads, but curious and bold, wielding swords and words on 6 continents to embrace life far from the Emerald Isle. Over time, these geese began calling in many languages. Now, Ireland herself, multilingual and multicultural, speaks over 70 languages. A polyglot republic on Europe's western frontier, drawing from these ancestral lines to the homeland, along with new arrivals sharing not Irish blood, but Irish ideals of freedom, tolerance, of opportunity, like the Varadkar family. His story, and Ireland's story, is a testament to the ideals the Taoiseach laid out this evening. A system of rules and structures premised on the dignity and worth of every individual, and a governing system by the people, for the people, to ensure liberty and freedom. Our welcome tonight to the Prime Minister takes place in a building dedicated to the life and career of our nation's youngest ever president, who dedicated his life to those beliefs. He stood on the frontier of a new world, ushering in a revolution of science, of medicine, and exploration. President Kennedy sought, at great political and personal risk, to redeem the promise of America to all God's children and to live in the sunlight of freedom and liberty. He knew that the world's future lay in knitting closer ties with apostles of liberation, freedom fighters on every continent who labored, as we had, to throw off a mantle of colonialism. Like President Eisenhower before him, President Kennedy was skeptical that military might would bring lasting peace. It was programs like the Alliance for Progress, through which he sought to export books and not bombs, to build homes and businesses, and draw nations into our orbit through peaceful change. Nowhere was that more evident than in his decision to reach out to the Soviet Union and move forward with de-escalating nuclear tensions and shelve atomic weaponry with their threat to destroy the world. Quote, "I'm talking about genuine peace," he said at American University in 1963. The kind of peace that makes life on Earth worth living. The kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and to build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not just purely peace in our time, but peace for all time. These words may seem strange and distant in a time of conflict, but they endure because they are timeless. And in a moment that they were uttered, they cut against the chill of a Cold War and Americans' obsession with an enemy. Tonight, we've had the privilege of hearing from a leader who has negotiated challenging political terrain to forge a new path for his own nation. Taoiseach, thank you for all you've done to advance the cause of tolerance, for all you've done to secure peace and prosperity on the island of Ireland, and for your efforts to carry the message of peace for all. For in the end, we can surely say, along with President Kennedy, that there's nothing really radical in, quote, knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own. Have a wonderful evening on Taoiseach. Thank you.